and this is Coasting with Culture, which is all about combining theme park visits and riding roller coasters with various cultural experiences around the world. Last time, I made my way to the town of Stourport for a coaster and found a historic lock that was part of a canal, then continued into Birmingham for another coaster before ending the day at Drayton Manor for a ride on the rare stand-up coaster Shockwave and a chance to explore Thomasland. This time, it's a day at what might be one of the most anticipated parts of the trip in Alton Towers, attempting to ride all of their coasters, including a bucket list ride that was on the verge of closing down, with a break in the middle of the day to check out their unique restaurant. The morning drive from Birmingham was fairly easy, with only a bit of traffic getting into the parking lot, although I wasn't expecting such a long walk to the front gate. If there was something that made this trek worthwhile though, it was a preview of some of the rides to come, including the ride that might have been the biggest motivation of the trip. Arriving to the gate after that long walk, it was neat to see how they repurposed part of the old corkscrew as a decoration for the entrance area, although I have to admit, it was a bummer to see the remnants of a coaster credit missed. As it was Halloween season, the park not only had special decorations for the occasion, but had some special entertainment for it as well. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see much else of their Halloween offerings, as I was on a bit of a mission for the day. So to start my coaster riding quest, I thought I'd try to knock out a few smaller coasters heading into Sibibi's Land, which is themed after characters and children's shows of the BBC network. In this area is the Octonauts Rollercoaster Adventure, a Zamperla Jr. coaster with a larger layout than I've seen for many of their smaller coasters, so I was curious to see how it rode, although that wouldn't come as quickly as I thought.
It went kaput. Gonna have to come back and try again later.
Well, rather than wait around, I figured I'd go ahead over to the next closest coaster, which happened to be visible from the Octonauts queue, Spinball Whizzer. This rather large Mauer spinning mouse coaster has some pretty large swooping drops, giving a more exciting experience than most spinning mouse coasters out there. This ride also ended up validating my plan to get a fast track, as it already had a wait time over 60 minutes, less than an hour after the park opened, and other rides would have similar wait times for a good chunk of the day. With one coaster down, I decided to see if Octonauts would open back up, and as luck had it, it was up and running again a few moments after I got back into a much shorter line. At this point, I was ready for something more thrilling, something that might put a smile on your face, if you will. Their Gerstlauer Infinity Coaster Smiler, with its record-breaking 14 inversions, was a ride that was really fascinating between the incredibly twisted and compact layout and the incredibly themed music that gave the ride a really creepy vibe. As for the ride experience,
I don't know if it did exactly as it was intended to do, but with all those inversions, it's hard to keep track of what was going on.
Overall, I did come off the ride with a smile, especially as I dug the disorientation, since it was essentially inversion after inversion after inversion after inversion, twisting you in all sorts of directions. My only complaint is that it ran a smidge rough and would have really benefited from having the lap bar only restraints like other Infinity coasters have. Smiler's Neighbor was another ride I was really curious to try, as this was the prototype of Bolliger and Mabyard's dive coaster, Oblivion. For those not familiar with Alton Towers, the park has a unique local building restriction to contend with in that nothing can be built taller than the trees, which makes it difficult to build massive coasters like those with less restrictions. The park manages to work around this though by taking advantage of the hilly terrain for some unique layouts, or in the case of Oblivion, dive underground. The lift is only about 65 feet tall, but the drop goes over 100 feet below the ground for a total of 180 feet. Then it comes out the other side of the tunnel into a banked turn and a much smaller drop before rolling into the brakes. Having ridden several dive coasters that came after, such as Griffin or Shikra, smaller variants like Krake and Emperor, and even G5, the Taiwanese mirrored clone of this ride, I was anticipating this to be among the weakest dive coaster experiences because of the short layout. I have to admit though, the long tunnel felt deceptively deep, which adds to the thrill, and the layout certainly fits this setting better than its Taiwanese clone. Its successors might offer more in their layouts, but they might not be the screen machines they are today without this prototype. As I saw the time, it felt like a great point in the day for some lunch. And when browsing their food options, I had forgotten that Alton Towers was home to one of the roller coaster restaurants, where your food gets its own coaster ride, so I knew that's where I had to go. This might have been one of my poorer decisions during this visit, not because of the food, but because of my present location over by Oblivion and the restaurant being way over on the other side of the park. As I looked at a map, I saw that you could go through the garden to get over to the Forbidden Valley. What I didn't realize though, was that the garden itself was in a pretty big valley, and it was a decent trek to get over to the other side, rather than the shortcut I thought it was going to be. But at least the gardens were beautiful to see. The extra hill climb certainly helped build up my appetite when I finally made it to the Rollercoaster restaurant. It was really something else to see the complexity of the various tracks as they led to the different tables, direct from the kitchen on the upper floor. But it's also fun to follow the different containers as they wind through these tracks with guests' orders inside. Ordering from the tablet is fairly simple, as you select the items you want, and when it's ready, the kitchen sends it down the track to your table with an attached number indicating which seat it belongs to. All that's left to do is enjoy. Along with some mac and cheese bites, I tried their chicken and beef stack, a hamburger with a couple of chicken tenders, cheese, and a sweet sauce that I couldn't quite figure out what it was, but I did enjoy the taste of it. This was certainly enough to last me through the day, as it was incredibly filling. After lunch, I continued the quest for coasters with a ride on Galactica, the prototype flying coaster from B&M, previously known as Air. While this was the beloved Swiss duo's first attempt at a flying machine, those local height restrictions seem to have handcuffed this ride more than several others in the park. Other flying coasters like Tatsu at Six Flags Magic Mountain really take advantage of that height to add to that flight sensation, although Galactica does make up for that lack of height through its close-to-the-ground encounters. After that came the coaster I'd been dreaming of for a long time and was perhaps the biggest influence in choosing to make this trip to England, the legendary B&M inverted coaster, Nemesis. It did not disappoint. This is by far the most unique layout for the inverted model, between the incredible use of the terrain, which feels like one long foot chopper effect, and the placement of elements for better utilization of that terrain as the coaster crosses over, under, and around itself. I really dug how, unlike any other invert, it starts off with a rather small drop into a flat spin, and like older B&Ms, it has some solid intensity. While I'm always going to have a soft spot in my heart for Raptor at Cedar Point, since it was the coaster that made me an enthusiast, I believe it's safe to say this became my favorite inverted coaster.
Getting to ride this monster? That alone has made the trip worthwhile.
After that bucket list ride, I continued on to the remaining coasters left in the park, starting with a lap on their mock-powered coaster, Runaway Mine Train, which has a neat placement alongside of Congo River Rapids. Also found near that Rapids ride was the next coaster, Wicker Man, a Great Coasters International wooden creation that has a neat pre-show before you hop aboard the train for a ride through the twists and turns that hug the terrain while rolling around and through the Wicker Man icon. I do enjoy a good GCI coaster, and this was a quality ride that manages to give a great feel of speed with the twister layout, and being able to do so without a larger first hill that many GCIs have because of those height restrictions. I wasn't quite through with all the coasters yet, but I decided to try out a family-friendly dark ride called Gangsta Granny, based on one of the books written by author David Williams. I wasn't familiar with the story, but dark rides can always make for a fun time, and that was certainly the case with this one, although something became pretty apparent while riding it.
What I gather about Gangsta Granny, not having read anything about Gangsta Granny before, she's a gangsta, and she farts a lot. Farting seemed to be a pretty common theme with that ride, so yeah.
As the sun went down, there were two coasters from Intamin left in the park. The first being Rita, their accelerator coaster that has a low-to-the-ground layout with helices and swooping turns. It's nearly identical to Desert Race at Heide Park, and while Rita is a smidge slower than its German counterpart, it feels faster because of the trees surrounding it. The last coaster to ride was Th13teen, an Intamin multi-dimension coaster which had the potential to be a really fun ride, but I found it pretty uncomfortable as the lap bar forces your legs tightly together in an awkward position. This very well could have just been because I'm a bigger guy, as I'd never read any complaints about this from others, but I spent most of my lap on it trying to minimize the discomfort, so I didn't get as much out of it. Fortunately, I was able to end the day on a very high note, as I took advantage of the fast track once more for a second lap on Smiler and Oblivion, then beelined over to the Forbidden Valley to get as many more laps as I could on Nemesis, as it had a very minimal wait. The nighttime rides were awesome and simply further convinced me that this might be the best B&M inverted coaster. While it's not confirmed what the plan is for the ride, I sincerely hope that at most, it's a total rebuild like Universal's Islands of Adventure did with the Incredible Hulk, because it would be awesome for this experience to live on for many years to come, as I found it to be a truly special ride. After closing out the park with 4 more laps on Nemesis, the time came to head to Manchester, where I would be staying that night.
And while I could walk back to the car, I think I'm gonna be lazy because I've been doing a lot of walking today. I'm gonna take the monorail.
While it would have been nice to take the easy ride back to the rental, the line seemed like it could take a while, so I had a change of heart.
On second thought, I'll walk.
Even with all the walking, it was an excellent day at Alton Towers, and the next day would be for another highly anticipated park that has an even larger coaster collection, as well as a chance to take in a special fall event that features a unique competition. Thank you for watching this Coastin' with Culture video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and click the subscribe button below to see future videos here on YouTube, like these ones which you may enjoy as well. Additional content can be found at coastingwithculture.com, and you can also follow Coastin' with Culture on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for announcements, previews, and updates. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, take care and safe travels.